I believe.
How did you find that out? Laurie colored up, but answered frankly,
Why, you see, I often hear you calling to one another, and when I'm alone up here, I can't help looking over at your house. You always seem to be having such good times. I beg your pardon for being so rude, but sometimes you forget to pull down the curtain at the window where the flowers are, and when the lamps are lighted, it's like looking at a picture to see the fire and you all around the table with your mother.
The solitary, hungry look in his eyes went straight to Joe's warm heart. We'll never draw that curtain any more, and I give you leave to look as much as you like. I just wish, though, instead of peeping, you'd come over and see us. Mother is so splendid, she'd do you heaps of good, and Beth would sing to you if I begged her to, and Amy would dance. Meg and I would make you laugh over our funny stage properties, and we'd have jolly times. Wouldn't your grandpa let you?
I think he would, if your mother asked him. He's very kind, though he does not look so, and he lets me do what I like, pretty much. Only he's afraid I might be a bother to strangers, began Laurie, brightening more and more.
We are not strangers. We are neighbors, and you needn't think you'd be a bother. We want to know you, and I've been trying to do it this ever so long. We haven't been here a great while, you know, but we have got acquainted with all our neighbors but you.
You see, Grandpa lives among his books and doesn't mind much what happens outside. Mr. Brooke, my tutor, doesn't stay here, you know, and I have no one to go about with me, so I just stop at home and get on as I can.
Then they got to talking about books, and to Joe's delight, she found that Laurie loved them as well as she did and had read even more than herself.
If you like them so much, come down and see ours. Grandfather is out, so you needn't be afraid,
said Laurie, getting up. I'm not afraid of anything, returned Joe with a toss of the head. What richness, sighed Joe, sinking into the depth of a velour chair and gazing about her with an air of intense satisfaction. Theodore Lawrence, you ought to be the happiest boy in the world, she added impressively.
A fella can't live on books,
said Laurie, shaking his head as he perched on a table opposite. Before he could say more, a bell rang, and Joe flew up, exclaiming with alarm, Mercy me, it's your grandpa.
Well, what if it is? You are not afraid of anything, you know,
returned the boy, looking wicked. The doctor to see you, sir, and the maid beckoned as she spoke. Laurie went away, and his guest amused herself in her own way. She was standing before a fine portrait of the old gentleman when the door opened again, and without turning she said decidedly, I'm sure now that I shouldn't be afraid of him, for he's got kind eyes, though his mouth is grim, and he looks as if he had a tremendous will of his own. He isn't as handsome as my grandfather, but I like him.
Thank you, ma'am,
said a gruff voice behind her, and there, to her great dismay, stood old Mr. Lawrence. Poor Joe blushed till she couldn't blush any redder, and her heart began to beat uncomfortably fast as she thought what she had said.
So, you're not afraid of me, hey?
Not much, sir.
And you don't think me as handsome as your grandfather?
Not quite, sir.
And I've got a tremendous will, have I?
I only said I thought so.
But you like me in spite of it?
Yes, I do, sir. That answer pleased the old gentleman. He gave a short laugh, shook hands with her, and putting his finger under her chin, turned up her face, examined it gravely, and let it go, saying with a nod,
You've got your grandfather's spirit, if you haven't his face. He was a fine man, my dear, but what is better, he was a brave and an honest one, and I was proud to be his friend.
Thank you, sir. And Joe was quite comfortable after that, for it suited her exactly.
There's the tea bell. We have it early on the boys' account. Come down and go on being neighborly.
If you'd like to have me, sir.
Shouldn't ask you if I didn't.
And Mr. Lawrence offered her his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. The old gentleman did not say much as he drank his 4 cups of tea, but he watched the young people, who soon chatted away like old friends, and the change in his grandson did not escape him. There was color, light, and life in the boy's face now, vivacity in his manner, and genuine merriment in his laugh. Joe's attention was then taken by a grand piano, which stood open. "Do you play?" she asked, turning to Laurie with a respectful expression. "Sometimes," he answered modestly. "Please do now. I want to hear it so I can tell Beth." So Laurie played, and Joe listened. Her respect and regard for the Lawrence boy increased very much, for he played remarkably well and didn't put on any airs. She wished Beth could hear him, but she did not say so, only praised him till he was quite abashed, and his grandfather came to his rescue.
That will do, young lady. Too many sugar plums are not good for him. His music isn't bad, but I hope he will do as well in more important things. Going? Well, I'm much obliged to you, and I hope you'll come again. My respects to your mother. Good night, Dr. Joe."
He shook hands kindly, but looked as if something did not please him. When they got into the hall, Joe asked Laurie if she had said something amiss. He shook his head.
"No, it was me. He doesn't like to hear me play."
"Why not?"
"I'll tell you someday. You will come again, I hope."
"If you promise to come and see us after you are well."
"I will."
"Good night, Laurie."
"Good night, Joe. Good night."
When all the afternoon's adventures had been told, the family felt inclined to go visiting in a body, for each found something very attractive in the big house on the other side of the hedge. Mrs. March wanted to talk of her father with the old man who had not forgotten him. Meg longed to walk in the conservatory. Beth sighed for the grand piano, and Amy was eager to see the fine pictures and statues. "Mother, why didn't Mr. Lawrence like to have Laurie play?" asked Joe, who was of an inquiring disposition.
"I am not sure, but I think it was because his son, Laurie's father, married an Italian lady, a musician, which displeased the old man, who was very proud. The lady was good and lovely and accomplished, but he did not like her, and never saw his son after he married. They both died when Laurie was a little child, and then his grandfather took him home. I fancy the boy, who was born in Italy, is not very strong, and the old man is afraid of losing him, which makes him so careful. Laurie comes naturally by his love of music, for he is like his mother, and I dare say his grandfather fears that he may want to be a musician. At any rate, his skill reminds him of the woman he did not like, and so he glowered, as Joe said."
"Dear me, how romantic!" exclaimed Meg.
"How silly!" said Joe.
"Let him be a musician if he wants to, and not plague his life out sending him to college when he hates to go. We'll all be good to him because he hasn't got any mother. And he may come over and see us, mayn't he, Marmee?"
"Yes, Joe. Your little friend is very welcome."
All sorts of pleasant things happened about that time, for the new friendship flourished like grass in spring. Everyone liked Laurie, and he privately informed his tutor that the Marches were regularly splendid girls. With the delightful enthusiasm of youth, they took the solitary boy into their midst and made much of him, and he found something very charming in the innocent companionship of these simple-hearted girls. What good times they had, to be sure! Such plays and tableaux, such sleigh rides and skating frolics, such pleasant evenings in the old parlor, and now and then such gay little parties at the great house. Meg could walk in the conservatory whenever she liked and revel in bouquets. Joe browsed over the new library voraciously and convulsed the old gentleman with her criticisms. Amy copied pictures and enjoyed beauty to her heart's content, and Laurie played Lord of the Manor in the most delightful style. But Beth, though yearning for the grand piano, could not pluck up courage to go to the mansion of bliss, as Meg called it. She went once with Joe, but the old gentleman, not being aware of her infirmity, stared at her so hard from under his heavy eyebrows and said, "Hey," so loud that she ran away, declaring she would never go there any more, not even for the dear piano. No persuasions or enticements could overcome her fear, till, the fact coming to Mr. Lawrence's ear in some mysterious way, he set about mending matters. During one of the brief calls he made, he artfully led the conversation to music, and talked away about great singers whom he had seen, fine organs he had heard, and told such charming anecdotes that Beth found it impossible to stay in her distant corner, but crept nearer and nearer, as if fascinated. Mr. Lawrence talked on about Laurie's lessons and teachers, and presently, as if the idea had just occurred to him, he said to Mrs. March,
"The boy neglects his music now, and I'm glad of it, for he was getting too fond of it. But the piano suffers for want of use.